This video discusses the measurement component of the trace analysis screen and should be viewed after the analysis displaying data video. Access the analysis screen via the main menu. Select the study you wish to analyse. The columns on the left indicate which studies have data summaries and reports. Either double-click on the name or select the name and click on OK. The controls for analysis are located below the purple timeline bar. Click on a marker to select the swallow. To view pressures at particular points, move the cursor over the point at which you wish to measure the pressure. You will notice that the value in the pressure crosshair indicator updates to show the pressure at the point of the crosshairs of the cursor. You can use the analysis cursor to measure a pressure gradient across the lower esophageal sphincter. Position the cursor so that the vertical component is at the time at which you wish to measure the gradient, and the horizontal component is above the sphincter. Note the pressure in the display, in this case 9.26 millimeters of mercury. Move the horizontal component of the cursor down below the sphincter and note the new pressure, in this case 2.59 millimeters of mercury. The pressure gradient is therefore just under 8 millimeters of mercury. You can measure times and distances using the Set X and Y button. Move the cursor to where you wish to begin the measurement and press on Set X and Y. Now move the cursor to the new point. Note that there is still a cursor at the first point, now called Mark, and the distances in millimeters and time in seconds, along with the derived velocity, are displayed in the bottom right-hand corner below the Set X and Y button. The first step in esophageal manometry analysis is to measure the basal sphincter pressure. To do this, you will need to have the appropriate data displayed in the colour plot. Go to the marker at which you began the basal pressure period and then click on the In Marker Mode button to change to Log Mode. You should display a couple of minutes of data. About 4 data logs is usually sufficient. You can move forward or backward to display a suitable period, aiming for as few swallows as possible. When you are satisfied with your selection, click on Measure Basal Pressure to move to the Basal Pressure Analysis screen. There are 2 ways to measure basal pressure, but in either case you first need to define the position of the sphincter. Move the horizontal cursor labelled above sphincter so that it is positioned just above the sphincter. Move the cursor labelled below sphincter so that it is positioned just below the sphincter. The data displayed on the graph is now the virtual sleeve, or the highest pressure between the 2 cursors at any point in time. The first way to measure basal pressure is to move the vertical cursors marked pressure to positions which you believe to be suitable for measurement of basal sphincter pressure, usually end expiratory pressure. Note that the values in the pink boxes update as you move the cursors. If you are not planning to use one of the values for your analysis, click on the green square below value and it will not be saved. Alternatively, you can measure the basal pressure using an automated tool. Adjust the horizontal cursors in the same way, but then click on the Use Estimate Cursors button. Adjust the 2 vertical cursors to the beginning and end of the period in which you wish to estimate the LOS pressure. The estimate is displayed just to the right of Use Estimate Cursors, and a frequency distribution of pressures in the virtual sleeve below those 2 points is displayed in the graph at the very bottom. The algorithm selects the most common pressure as the best estimate of basal pressure. In this case, as there is a sharp peak in the frequency distribution, it is likely that this is a robust estimate. Regardless of which method you use, click on Accept Estimated Pressure to return to the main analysis screen with the basal pressures saved. Although the basal pressures are not displayed in the analysis screen, you can check the saved values by clicking on Edit Basal Pressure. In this screen, you can view the basal pressures you have recorded and deselect any that you do not wish to save with the swallows. Click on Finish to return to the analysis screen with your changes saved. Trace offers two methods of analysis: a simple analysis based on measurement of nadir pressures and routine swallow classification, or a method based on the 2012 version of the Chicago classification. In general, I would suggest that you select and use one method per study, as if you mix the two methods of analysis, Trace will assume that you are using the Chicago classification and measurements, and swallows that you have saved where you have used the simple analysis may make the results of this unreliable. First, we will look at the simple analysis. This is based on measurement of several nadir pressures and classification of a series of swallows. Two Chicago classification measurements, IRP and DCI, have been incorporated for you to use if you wish, but this is not necessary in the simple analysis. You can measure the nadir pressure directly in the analysis screen using the analysis cursor. Position the cursor at the point where you wish to measure the nadir pressure and then click on Set Nadir to Crosshair Value. The nadir pressure will update to that value. You will still need to give the swallow a classification before the data can be saved. Alternatively, you can perform an algorithmic analysis by clicking on Measure Nadir Pressure, IRP, which will take you to the nadir and IRP measurement screen. Position the horizontal cursors above and below the lower sphincter and the begin relaxation and end relaxation cursors at the beginning and end of the LOS relaxation, respectively. The nadir and 4-second IRP pressures will be displayed. These differ slightly because of the different methods of measurement. The 4-second IRP is the mean of the lowest 4 seconds of data in the virtual sleeve between the cursors, whereas the nadir pressure is the 10th centile pressure over the same period. Both are displayed and will be saved. You'll have a choice later which to use in the report. Click on Finish to return to the main analysis screen with the data uploaded in the indicators. You can measure the DCI from the analysis screen by clicking on Calculate DCI, which will take you to the DCI measurement screen. Position the cursors so that they encompass the area from which you wish to measure the DCI. The DCI value will update as you do this. Some extra data related to the cursor positions is displayed, but will not be saved with the analysis. Click on Accept Data to return to the main analysis screen with the DCI data. Before you can save a swallow, you need to give it a classification from the pull-down menu beside the timeline. Once you have classified the swallow, click on Save Swallow to save the swallow data and move on to the next marker. If you already have a swallow with a particular comment saved, you will get a message to tell you of this when you save a swallow. This is intended to warn you about potential duplication of swallows saved and is more likely to happen if you do not use the counting function during data recording. You can enter some notes to be saved with the data file to be accessed again later. To do this, click on the Notes button. Enter the text and save it. It will be there when you view the screen next time. If you wish to view the data you have saved so far and perhaps make some changes to it, you can access this through the Edit Summary button, which will bring up this screen, the function of which is described in detail elsewhere. Make any changes and then press on Stop to return to the analysis screen. If you discover that an incorrect marker has been entered during data recording, you can correct this in the Data Summary file using the pull-down menu above the comments display. If, for example, you decide that the swallow selected here was actually done with the patient upright rather than in the right lateral position, click on the pull-down menu to the right of comments. When you select one of the menu items, which are identical to those available in the recording screen, it will be inserted at the beginning of the comments, which will change the designation of the swallow for analysis purposes. If you wish to perform an analysis according to the Chicago criteria, you'll need to use a separate set of screens and technique. Measure the basal pressures in the usual way and then ensure that the colour contour scheme is showing. This is accessed from the Colour Scheme pull-down menu. Once you have selected this, you'll see a black contour at 20 mm of mercury and a white contour at 30 mm of mercury. To access the Chicago analysis screen, click on the Chicago Analysis button. After you enter this screen, you will need to adjust the position of the cursors. Place the two lower horizontal cursors above and below the lower esophageal sphincter. These will be used to define the IRP. Move the below UES cursor to a position below the upper sphincter. This defines the upper limit of the analysis of peristaltic brakes. Place the swallow cursor at the beginning of the upper sphincter relaxation. This will be used to define the beginning of the swallow for the IRP and distal latency measurements. Move the end analysis cursor to the end of the swallow. This defines the end of the analysis for the purposes of the DCI, peristaltic brakes, and the IRP. Move the proximal limit cursor to the earliest point of the 30 mm of mercury contour in the lower segment of the esophagus. This will be used to define the beginning and proximal extent of the DCI and the upper point for the calculation of the contraction front velocity. Move the cursor labelled CDP to the point of intersection of the tangents of the contraction front and the slower contraction of the phrenic ampulla on the 30 mm of mercury contour. The IRP will be measured between the above LES and below LES cursors from the swallow cursor to the end analysis cursor. The DCI will be measured between the proximal limit cursor, the above LES cursor, and the end analysis cursor. The distal latency will be measured as the time between the swallow cursor and the CDP. The contraction front velocity will be measured as the slope of the line between the proximal limit and CDP cursors. The number of small and large brakes will be measured between the cursors marked below UES and above LES from the time of the swallow marker to the end analysis marker. You will see the Chicago measurements displayed below based on the data and position of the cursors you have set. As you move the cursors, you will see the measurements update. The graph below the colour plot is the virtual sleeve, as described in the basal sphincter pressure measurement screen. The graph on the right is similar in concept but based in time rather than space. It is a graph of the highest pressures between the swallow and end analysis cursors and is used to define the length of any peristaltic brakes. The solid bar at the right-hand end of the colour plot shows the analysis for large and small peristaltic brakes based on the data between the below UES and above LOS horizontal cursors. The green areas have not been considered in the analysis, and within the analysed area, intact contraction segments are black and brakes are coloured red. The number of small and large brakes is shown below. Once you have adjusted the cursors, the swallow will have been automatically classified based on the Chicago criteria in the blue boxes. If you do not agree with the automated classification, click on Automatically Estimating Classifications and you will be able to change these manually. Note that the definitions of the classifications are displayed to the right of the blue boxes. When you are satisfied with the data and classification, click on Accept Save Data to return to the main analysis screen. When you return, you'll note that the Save Swallow button is flashing to remind you that you need to save the data. Alternatively, you can click on Accept Save Data and proceed. This will automatically press the Save Swallow and Chicago Analysis buttons returning you to the Chicago analysis screen with the next swallow automatically loaded. Proceed to classify all of the swallows and then either click on Stop to return to the main menu screen or on Generate Report to proceed to report this study.